Why do so many Japanese men and women in their 90s still walk independently, manage their blood pressure naturally, and take little or no daily medication, while adults in their 50s or early 60s elsewhere are already dealing with stiffness, rising blood sugar, and multiple prescriptions? This contrast is real, it is measurable, and it is not explained by genetics or by any miracle. In discussions about Japanese longevity, people often assume that long life and healthy aging must come from rare genes or extraordinary medical care. But when researchers and physicians observe elderly Japanese populations closely, especially those living actively into their 90s and beyond, a much simpler explanation appears. Their health outcomes are shaped by consistent daily habits, repeated quietly over decades, beginning with how the body is treated in the early morning, before the first meal of the day. After the age of 50, the body changes in predictable ways. Overnight, dehydration increases slightly, blood becomes more concentrated, cortisol levels rise, and insulin sensitivity shifts. For younger adults, these changes are usually corrected quickly. For older adults, however, this overnight metabolic stress lingers longer. This is why aging after 50 is often accompanied by morning joint stiffness, unstable blood pressure upon waking, elevated fasting glucose, and a general sense of heaviness or fatigue early in the day. In many Western routines, breakfast is treated as the starting point of health for the day. Little attention is given to what happens before eating. But in Japanese preventive medicine, the period before breakfast is considered a critical window. This is the time when inflammation can be reduced or aggravated, when blood sugar regulation can be supported or disrupted, and when circulation either stabilizes or becomes strained. Over years and decades, these small daily effects accumulate into very different long-term outcomes. Japanese elders who age well do not rely on supplements, extreme diets, or aggressive interventions. Their approach is centered on simplicity and repetition. Rather than trying to fix problems after they appear, they reduce daily physiological stress before it builds. This is one of the key reasons why rates of severe morning hypertension, advanced type 2 diabetes, and mobility loss are lower among elderly Japanese populations compared to many Western countries. The Japanese diet and daily structure support disease prevention long before symptoms require treatment. Have you ever noticed how often health problems seem worse in the morning as people get older? That is not coincidence. The body's ability to regulate itself after fasting declines with age. What happens in the first hour after waking strongly influences how the rest of the day unfolds, especially for adults over 50. This is why focusing only on calories, exercise, or medications misses a critical part of the picture. From this medical perspective, Japanese longevity is not mysterious. It is the predictable result of protecting the body during its most vulnerable daily phase. The habits practiced before breakfast help stabilize blood pressure, support glucose control, reduce unnecessary inflammation, and preserve joint mobility. When done consistently, they create conditions that allow healthy aging rather than forcing the body to compensate later with medication. This understanding shifts the focus away from dramatic solutions and towards small, structured choices that are easy to repeat. In the next part, we will begin looking closely at the specific foods used before breakfast and why each one plays a role in supporting long-term health when aging after 50. To understand why these early morning practices matter, it helps to look at what the body is actually dealing with before the first meal of the day. After several hours without food or fluid, circulation is slower, connective tissues are less hydrated, and the digestive system has not yet been activated. In adults over 50, these conditions persist longer and place extra strain on blood vessels, joints, and glucose regulation. This is why morning blood pressure readings are often higher, why stiffness is most noticeable upon waking, and why the first meal can trigger sharp changes in blood sugar. In Japanese preventive care, the goal is not to stimulate the body aggressively in the morning, but to restore balance gently and predictably. This is done by addressing hydration, circulation, and digestive readiness before introducing calories. Rather than skipping straight to breakfast or coffee, attention is given to preparing the internal environment so the body can handle food with less stress. Over time, this reduces the cumulative strain that leads to chronic conditions. One of the most consistent observations among long-lived Japanese elders is that breakfast is rarely the first thing they consume. There is a short but intentional period beforehand in which the body is eased out of its overnight state. This is not a complex routine and does not require special products. It relies on ordinary foods and simple preparation, repeated daily. The purpose is to rehydrate tissues, encourage gentle circulation, and signal the digestive system to begin working without overload. From a biological standpoint, this approach supports smoother insulin response when food is introduced. It also reduces the sudden shifts in blood pressure that commonly occur when eating on an unprepared system. For joints and muscles, gradual rehydration and activation help reduce the stiffness that many people accept as unavoidable after 50. These effects are subtle on any single day, but when repeated for years, they shape long-term outcomes. This is why Japanese longevity is closely linked to routine rather than intensity. The same actions are performed every morning, regardless of age, season, or schedule. There is no attempt to optimize or change the habit constantly. Stability is the advantage. The Japanese diet supports this pattern by emphasizing foods that are easy to digest, low in metabolic stress, and effective in small amounts. If you compare this to common Western habits, skipping preparation entirely, relying on stimulants, or eating heavy foods immediately after waking, the contrast becomes clear. The difference is not effort, but timing. Have you noticed how your body responds differently depending on what you consume first in the morning? With this context in mind, we can now begin looking closely at the first food commonly used before breakfast, how it is prepared, and why it plays such a central role in supporting healthy aging and disease prevention after 50. The focus here is the physiological state of the body in the first minutes after waking, before any food is consumed. This is not a habit or a food yet, but a condition that every aging body enters daily. After several hours of sleep and fasting, the body wakes in a mildly dehydrated state. Blood volume is slightly reduced, blood viscosity is higher, and circulation is slower. At the same time, cortisol naturally rises as part of the waking response, preparing the body to become alert. Insulin sensitivity is also altered, meaning the way the body handles the first intake of food is different than later in the day. Joints and connective tissues, having been still for hours, are less lubricated, which explains the stiffness many people feel as soon as they stand up. These changes are normal and occur in everyone, but their impact increases significantly with age. Biologically, overnight fasting affects glucose regulation because liver glucose output rises while muscle uptake remains low until movement and hydration resume. Vascular tension also changes, as blood vessels are less elastic in the morning, especially in older adults. This combination creates a state where blood pressure can fluctuate more easily, and where sudden demands on the system produce exaggerated responses. This is why morning hours are associated with higher risk of blood pressure spikes, dizziness, and even cardiovascular events in older populations. After the age of 50, recovery from this overnight state becomes slower. The kidneys concentrate urine more, contributing to dehydration. The autonomic nervous system adapts less efficiently to postural changes, increasing the chance of lightheadedness when standing. Insulin resistance, even when mild, makes the first meal more likely to cause a rapid rise in blood sugar. Joint tissues, having lost some elasticity over time, respond more noticeably to inactivity. Fatigue in the morning is not a lack of sleep in many cases, but a sign that the body is struggling to re-establish balance after the night. Now I want to go deeper into this, because one common misconception is that breakfast itself fixes these problems. Many people believe that eating immediately after waking will restore energy and stabilize the body. In reality, introducing food into an unprepared system can increase metabolic stress. When dehydration has not been addressed and circulation remains sluggish, digestion demands blood flow and insulin response at a moment when the body is least adaptable. After 50, this often leads to sharper glucose spikes, a heavier feeling after meals, and prolonged stiffness rather than relief. The consequence of this mistake is cumulative. When the first meal repeatedly arrives before the body is ready, low-grade inflammation increases, vascular stress accumulates, and metabolic regulation becomes less stable over years. This does not cause immediate illness, which is why it is often ignored, but its long-term effect contributes to the conditions commonly associated with aging: hypertension, impaired glucose control, reduced mobility, and chronic fatigue. Japanese elders approach this morning state differently. Instead of rushing to eat, they treat the first 30 minutes after waking as a period of physiological preparation. This approach is grounded in prevention rather than correction. The goal is to restore hydration gradually, encourage gentle circulation, and allow hormonal and nervous system activity to settle before digestion begins. This is why morning routines among long-lived Japanese populations appear calm and unhurried. They are not designed for productivity, but for stability. In daily life, this means acknowledging that the body has limits in the morning, especially with age. Simple actions taken immediately after waking can reduce strain rather than add to it. Standing up slowly, allowing time before eating, and avoiding sudden demands on the system are practical decisions that respect the biology of aging. These choices require consistency more than effort, and their impact depends on repetition rather than intensity. Understanding the morning state of the aging body explains why small daily choices made before breakfast have such a long-term effect. When the body is supported during its most vulnerable phase, the rest of the day becomes easier to regulate, and cumulative stress is reduced over time. Comment: This makes sense to me. The habit practiced by many Japanese elders before breakfast is simple and consistent. They begin the day by gently rehydrating the body with plain warm or room temperature liquid, taken slowly, and then allowing a short period of calm movement or stillness before any food is introduced. This is not a treatment, a detox, or a special remedy. It is a daily action repeated in the same way for decades. The purpose is not stimulation, but preparation. By doing this immediately after waking, the body is supported as it transitions out of the overnight fasting state. Now I want to go deeper into this, because the biological impact of this habit is often underestimated. After sleep, blood volume is slightly reduced and circulation is less efficient. Introducing gentle hydration increases plasma volume, lowers blood viscosity, and allows blood to move more freely through smaller vessels. This directly affects blood pressure stability and tissue oxygenation. At the same time, warm or neutral temperature liquid stimulates the vagus nerve, which helps balance the nervous system. This reduces unnecessary stress responses and prepares the digestive tract to function smoothly when food arrives. Rather than forcing the body to react, the system is guided back into balance. For digestion, this habit signals the stomach and intestines to begin coordinated movement without the burden of processing nutrients immediately. Enzymatic activity increases gradually, and gastric emptying becomes more efficient later. For circulation, gentle movement or upright posture after hydration encourages blood flow to joints and muscles, reducing stiffness. These effects are modest on their own, but their long-term effect depends on consistency. This is why Japanese elders do not change this routine frequently or intensify it. The impact comes from daily repetition. A common mistake is replacing this preparation with stimulants, especially coffee, immediately after waking. Many people believe caffeine is necessary to start the day or to overcome morning fatigue. After age 50, this habit can increase sympathetic nervous system activity too quickly. Instead of restoring balance, it raises heart rate and blood pressure before hydration has occurred. This can worsen morning stiffness, promote glucose instability later in the morning, and increase reliance on stimulants over time. The consequence is not immediate harm, but increased physiological strain that accumulates year after year. Japanese elders approach this differently by separating preparation from stimulation. They do not rush to activate the body. The first objective is restoration. Hydration comes first, then gentle movement or quiet activity, and only afterward does food enter the system. This sequence respects the reduced metabolic speed and lower autonomic flexibility that come with aging. By avoiding sudden demands, the body maintains steadier control over circulation and digestion throughout the morning. Applied realistically, this habit does not require special timing devices, measurements, or products. It fits easily into ordinary routines. A glass or cup of warm or room temperature liquid, consumed calmly after waking, followed by a short period of light activity or simply remaining upright, is sufficient. The key is not perfection, but consistency. When practiced daily, this small decision reduces the burden placed on the body at its most vulnerable time. Over years, this habit supports prevention rather than correction. It lowers the need for the body to compensate later in the day and reduces the long-term effect of morning metabolic stress. This is why it remains common among older adults who age well. Comment: I'm starting with one change. The habit of gentle hydration and preparation before breakfast has a direct impact on how the body handles blood sugar once the first meal is eaten. This effect is not immediate in a dramatic way, but it is measurable and consistent over time. By allowing the body to rehydrate and stabilize circulation before food intake, glucose enters a system that is already partially balanced rather than one still under overnight stress. This changes how insulin is released and how efficiently glucose is taken up by muscles and tissues. Now I want to go deeper into this, because blood sugar regulation in the morning is strongly influenced by timing, not just by what is eaten. After waking, the liver releases glucose into the bloodstream as part of the normal fasting response. At the same time, insulin sensitivity is lower than later in the day, especially in adults over 50. When food is introduced too quickly, particularly carbohydrates, glucose levels rise sharply while insulin response lags behind. This mismatch creates higher post-breakfast glucose peaks, even when the meal itself is not excessive. Gentle hydration before breakfast improves this situation in several ways. First, increasing blood volume through fluid intake dilutes circulating glucose slightly and improves delivery of insulin to target tissues. Second, calmer nervous system activity reduces stress hormones that interfere with insulin action. Third, improved circulation allows muscles to begin absorbing glucose more effectively once food is consumed. These combined effects lead to a smoother glucose curve rather than a rapid spike followed by a drop. After age 50, these differences become more important. Insulin resistance increases gradually with age, even in people who are not overweight and who eat reasonably well. Prediabetes often develops silently during this period, with morning glucose levels being the first to rise. Repeated sharp spikes after breakfast place additional strain on pancreatic function and accelerate metabolic decline. This is why many people notice worsening energy, cravings, or fatigue in the late morning as they get older. A common misconception is that controlling blood sugar requires strict food restriction or eliminating carbohydrates entirely. In reality, timing and preparation often matter more than intensity. Eating a healthy breakfast too soon, before the body has stabilized, can still produce unfavorable glucose responses. After 50, this mistake contributes to progressive insulin resistance, even when overall diet quality appears good. Over time, this leads to higher fasting glucose, increased reliance on medication, and greater difficulty maintaining metabolic stability. Japanese elders manage this differently by prioritizing readiness over restriction. The morning preparation period allows the body to shift gradually from fasting to feeding. When breakfast arrives, insulin response is more coordinated and glucose uptake is smoother. This reduces the burden on the pancreas and lowers daily glucose variability. The result is not dramatic change from one day to the next, but a reduced long-term effect of repeated metabolic stress. In practical terms, this approach does not require counting grams, avoiding entire food groups, or skipping meals. It requires allowing the body a short window to stabilize before eating. This may involve simple hydration, remaining upright, and avoiding immediate stimulation that disrupts hormonal balance. When breakfast is eaten after this preparation, even modest meals produce more stable blood sugar responses. Over years, this consistency supports prevention rather than correction. This pattern explains why Japanese longevity is closely linked to daily choices that reduce strain rather than force control. Blood sugar stability is not achieved through intensity, but through repeated timing decisions that respect how the aging body functions. Comment: this makes sense to me. The same pre-breakfast habit of gentle hydration combined with light, unforced movement has a direct effect on joints, muscles, and the stiffness many people feel upon waking. This is not exercise and not stretching in an athletic sense. It is a simple process of allowing fluids to circulate and tissues to reawaken before the body is asked to digest food or perform demanding tasks. Japanese elders rely on this habit because it reduces discomfort at the very start of the day and helps preserve mobility over time. Now I want to go deeper into this, because morning stiffness is often misunderstood as an unavoidable sign of aging. Biologically, joints depend on synovial fluid to reduce friction between cartilage surfaces. During sleep, movement is minimal, and this fluid becomes less evenly distributed. Muscles also receive less blood flow overnight, and nerve signaling slows slightly. When the body wakes, these systems do not immediately return to full function, especially after the age of 50. Without gentle activation, stiffness persists longer and movement feels uncomfortable or restricted. Hydration plays a critical role here. Water is a major component of synovial fluid and connective tissue. When the body is mildly dehydrated after sleep, joints have less lubrication and muscles receive less efficient oxygen delivery. Introducing fluid early helps restore volume and supports circulation into these tissues. Gentle upright posture or light movement further encourages synovial fluid to spread across joint surfaces. This improves range of motion and reduces the sensation of stiffness without forcing the joints. A common mistake is either remaining completely still for too long after waking or, at the opposite extreme, engaging in sudden, intense movement to loosen up. After age 50, both approaches can increase discomfort. Prolonged immobility allows stiffness to deepen, while abrupt movement places stress on joints and muscles that are not yet ready. This often leads to micro-irritation, reinforcing the belief that joints are deteriorating quickly with age. The consequence of this mistake is cumulative. When joints repeatedly start the day under strain, inflammation increases subtly over time. Connective tissue loses elasticity faster, and muscles become more reactive to small loads. Morning stiffness then lasts longer, sometimes extending into the middle of the day. This reduces overall activity levels, which further accelerates loss of mobility. Many people interpret this as normal aging, but much of it is influenced by daily decisions made in the first hour of the morning. Japanese elders address this differently by prioritizing gentle activation before eating or engaging in tasks. They do not attempt to eliminate stiffness instantly. Instead, they allow joints and muscles to rehydrate and warm gradually. Simple movements such as standing, walking slowly indoors, or performing basic daily activities are enough. The goal is circulation, not exertion. This approach respects the reduced elasticity of aging connective tissue and works with it rather than against it. In practical daily life, this means avoiding the urge to rush. After hydration, remaining upright and moving lightly gives joints time to respond. There is no requirement for equipment, routines, or instruction. The key factor is consistency. When this pattern is repeated every morning, joint comfort improves gradually, and stiffness becomes less disruptive. Over years, this reduces the long-term effect of cumulative strain and supports preserved mobility. This habit demonstrates how prevention works quietly. By preparing joints and muscles before placing demands on them, the body experiences less wear each day. These small reductions in stress add up and influence how mobility changes with age. Comment: this makes sense to me. The same pre-breakfast habit of gentle hydration followed by calm, unhurried movement has a significant influence on blood pressure and overall circulation in the morning. This is not a cardiovascular treatment or a corrective measure, but a daily behavior that affects how blood vessels respond during the most sensitive time of day. Japanese elders rely on this habit because it helps stabilize vascular tone before the body is exposed to food, activity, or stress. Now I want to go deeper into this, because morning blood pressure patterns are closely linked to how the circulatory system transitions out of sleep. During the night, blood pressure naturally drops, and blood vessels remain in a more relaxed state. Upon waking, the body activates the sympathetic nervous system, increasing heart rate and vascular tone to prepare for activity. In younger adults, this transition is smooth. After age 50, blood vessels lose elasticity, and the nervous system becomes less adaptable. This makes sudden changes in pressure more likely. Mild dehydration after sleep plays an important role here. Reduced blood volume means the heart must work harder to maintain pressure, while stiffer vessels resist smooth expansion. When abrupt stimulation occurs, such as standing quickly, consuming caffeine, or eating a heavy meal immediately, blood pressure can rise sharply. These rapid fluctuations are associated with dizziness, headaches, and, in more serious cases, increased risk of stroke during morning hours. Gentle hydration before breakfast supports circulation by increasing plasma volume and reducing blood thickness. This allows blood to flow more easily through small vessels and reduces resistance against vessel walls. At the same time, calm movement and upright posture help the autonomic nervous system adjust gradually. Rather than forcing the cardiovascular system to react suddenly, the body is allowed to recalibrate step by step. This creates more stable blood pressure readings throughout the morning. A common mistake is assuming that morning blood pressure problems are only related to salt intake or genetics. While these factors matter, timing and behavior are often overlooked. After 50, many people unknowingly worsen morning hypertension by rushing, skipping preparation, or relying on stimulants immediately after waking. The consequence is repeated vascular stress. Over years, this contributes to persistently elevated blood pressure, greater reliance on medication, and increased cardiovascular risk. Japanese elders approach this differently by protecting the morning transition. Their routines are structured but simple. They hydrate first, move calmly, and avoid sudden demands on the cardiovascular system. This does not eliminate the need for medical care when necessary, but it reduces daily strain on blood vessels. Over time, this lowers the cumulative impact of repeated pressure spikes and supports long-term cardiovascular stability. In daily life, this approach is realistic and practical. It does not require monitoring devices or strict schedules. It involves allowing the body a brief period to restore fluid balance and circulation before introducing food or stimulation. Standing slowly, walking lightly indoors, and maintaining a calm pace are enough. When practiced consistently, these small decisions influence how blood pressure behaves not only in the morning, but throughout the day. This habit shows how prevention operates quietly through timing rather than force. By stabilizing circulation early, the body is less likely to experience abrupt vascular stress later. This pattern supports healthier blood pressure regulation as part of everyday life. Comment: this makes sense to me. The habit of gentle hydration followed by calm, unhurried movement before breakfast has persisted across generations in Japan because it consistently produces observable benefits in daily life. This is not maintained through formal instruction or theory, but through repeated outcomes that older adults can feel and measure for themselves. Reduced morning discomfort, steadier energy, fewer digestive issues, and more stable blood pressure reinforce the behavior without the need for explanation. Over time, this creates a pattern that is passed on simply because it works. Now I want to go deeper into this, because the persistence of this habit is closely tied to how the body responds to reduced strain rather than increased effort. From a biological standpoint, actions that lower daily physiological stress are more likely to be maintained with age. Habits that demand intensity, precision, or constant adjustment tend to be abandoned as recovery capacity decreases. In contrast, behaviors that support circulation, digestion, and nervous system balance without effort become easier to sustain. The morning preparation habit fits this model precisely. It reduces friction within the body rather than attempting to force improvement. A common misconception is that effective health practices must be challenging, complex, or constantly updated. After 50, this belief often leads people to cycle through new routines, diets, or supplements, each requiring motivation and adaptation. The consequence is inconsistency. When effort fluctuates, benefits disappear, and the body experiences repeated periods of stress and adjustment. This pattern accelerates fatigue and discouragement, making long-term prevention less effective. Japanese elders approach health decisions differently. Rather than seeking maximum improvement, they prioritize stability. Habits are evaluated based on whether they reduce daily strain and whether they can be repeated without resistance. The morning routine persists because it meets both criteria. It fits naturally into daily life, requires no special conditions, and delivers small but reliable benefits. Over years, these benefits become visible in preserved mobility, calmer mornings, and reduced dependence on corrective measures. Medical practice in Japan reinforces this approach by emphasizing prevention through daily structure. Clinicians observe that patients who maintain simple, consistent routines experience fewer complications and require fewer interventions later. This observation strengthens trust in habits that work quietly rather than dramatically. When outcomes are visible in peers and elders, adoption becomes natural. The habit is not promoted, it is copied. After 50, priorities shift toward preserving function rather than expanding capacity. Older adults become more selective about how they spend energy. Habits that demand effort without clear return are dropped, while those that support comfort and stability are retained. This explains why the morning preparation practice remains common among long-lived populations. It aligns with the biological reality of aging and respects the body's limits. Applied realistically, this habit does not require cultural context to be effective. It relies on universal physiology. Any adult can adopt it without changing identity, schedule, or diet. The key factor is consistency. When the same sequence is repeated daily, the body responds predictably. Over time, this reduces the need for correction and supports long-term effect through prevention. This is how simple decisions become generational habits. They remain because they lower strain, support function, and require no force to maintain. Comment: I'm starting with one change. The habit discussed throughout this explanation is not a single action aimed at one organ, but a simple morning sequence that influences multiple systems at the same time. The underlying logic connecting its effects on circulation, metabolism, joints, and digestion is based on how the body transitions from rest to activity after prolonged fasting. When hydration, posture, and calm movement are introduced before food, the body shifts into function gradually rather than being forced into immediate demand. This shared physiological principle explains why one small routine can influence so many different outcomes. Now I want to go deeper into this, because the key mechanism here is systemic stability. Every morning, the body must redistribute fluids, adjust blood vessel tone, activate digestion, and re-establish efficient glucose handling. These processes are not independent. Circulation affects how glucose is delivered and cleared. Nervous system balance influences digestion and vascular response. Joint comfort depends on hydration and blood flow. When these systems are supported together, the body operates with less friction. When they are stressed together, strain multiplies. Biologically, small daily inputs matter because they are repeated thousands of times. A single morning with rushed behavior has little impact. Years of rushed mornings compound into higher blood pressure variability, increased insulin resistance, reduced mobility, and digestive inefficiency. After the age of 50, recovery capacity declines. The body still adapts, but it does so more slowly and with greater cost. This is why consistency becomes more important than intensity. Habits that reduce strain daily allow the body to stay within a manageable range rather than constantly correcting excess stress. A common misconception is that health improvements must come from strong interventions applied occasionally. Many people focus on exercise intensity, dietary restriction, or short-term programs while overlooking the daily baseline. After 50, this approach often backfires. Intense actions require recovery that the body cannot fully provide. The consequence is repeated cycles of effort followed by fatigue or abandonment. Over time, this pattern increases instability rather than resilience. Japanese elders approach this differently by focusing on lowering the baseline demand placed on the body each day. Their morning routine does not aim to improve one metric quickly. It aims to prevent multiple systems from being stressed at the same time. By stabilizing circulation, nervous system activity, and hydration before food, the body is less reactive throughout the day. This reduces the need for correction later through medication, restriction, or recovery periods. This logic is reinforced by observable outcomes rather than explanation. When mornings feel calmer, joints move more freely, digestion is comfortable, and energy remains steady, the behavior is naturally repeated. Over decades, these repeated decisions shape long-term effect. The body remains within functional limits more often, and age-related decline progresses more slowly. This is prevention expressed through structure rather than effort. Applied realistically, this principle does not require detailed planning or monitoring. It requires respecting the order in which the body prefers to function. Preparing the system before demanding performance allows all systems to work together instead of competing. This approach aligns with how aging physiology responds best, through reduced strain, predictable timing, and daily choices that support stability. Understanding this shared logic creates clarity. It explains why one simple routine influences many outcomes and why it remains effective without modification. Comment: this makes sense to me. If this explanation was useful to you, staying connected makes sense. The focus here is always on practical habits drawn from Japanese longevity, healthy aging, everyday food choices, and disease prevention, explained in a clear and realistic way. Subscribing simply means you'll continue to see content built around the same calm, evidence-based approach. If you watched all the way through, you can leave a comment with the phrase, "This made sense to me, so I know this format is working for you." And if the video added value to your understanding, a like is a simple way to acknowledge that. There's another video available that complements what we discussed here and continues this line of thinking in a practical way. You can move straight to that when you're ready.